Hello, and welcome to our podcast,
Sisters Not Wives.
I'm your host, Kinsley Hatch.
And I'm Jocelyn Hatch.
Thanks for joining. Super fresh. But, okay. So, last episode we talked about the Pratts and kind of the Pratt scandal that happened with, Sarah Pratt being involved in like some... Yeah.
Wild.
It was wild. It was like some kind of scandal or sexual manipulation where it was either with like John C. Bennett or Joseph Smith, but like they were just fighting each other majorly, trying to defend their reputations, and she kind of got caught in the crossfires. I honestly wasn't even going to tell that story. But first of all, I just feel like it's compelling. And second of all, I feel like it is a really good demonstration of kind of on an individual level what was happening in Nauvoo on like bigger level.
Mm-hmm.
So in Nauvoo, it's not debated that that people were practicing polygamy in Nauvoo. That's not something that's historically debated or debated by like Mormon apologists or like ex-Mormon people at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's like
apologists. That's such an interesting. Have you used that word before? I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
anyway.
I'd never heard that word before until I was reading like anti-Mormon literature and then reading the opposite side of it.
Interesting.
But apologists are like people who are dedicated to like kind of answering like the ex-Mormon or whatever you want to call it, like answering the hard parts of church history and defending it. So it's kind of like historians for the church, but with the mindset of their apologists, which sounds like they're apologizing for the history, but they're not. They're defending it. So yeah, it's like all through the lens of like defending. And so both sides of, obviously they're on opposite ends, like anti-Mormon or ex-Mormon people and what they say about church history, and then like church historians and church apologists, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
About what's right or wrong. But everyone agrees that in Nauvoo, people were practicing polygamy, but how the church separates it is like there was two groups of people practicing polygamy. There was Joseph Smith, who was being like called by God to do it, and the like special group of people that he was telling that they were allowed to practice polygamy too. And they said in total, it was probably like 29 men and 50 women who were practicing it in that group.
Well, this is while Joseph is still alive in Nauvoo.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
And then they said there's the other group that like people like John C. Bennett, who like heard about rumors of polygamy and then started practicing it just by themselves, pretending they got authority from the church or Joseph Smith or the first presidency, and lying to women like, oh no, it's okay. But it wasn't like eternal marriage. It wasn't polygamy. It was more like their spiritual wife system, which basically was just like, we can sleep around and God's okay with it. And so there was that group of people. So how the church looks at it is like, obviously Joseph Smith was good. Brigham Young, everyone who was doing it secretly, they were the good people because they weren't doing it for sexual reasons. They were doing it because God told them to do it. And everyone who participated actually hated the idea, but then they got like a spiritual confirmation from God and it made it okay. And so that's what they believe. And then the second group was sexually motivated, and it was all about lust and lying and all that.
Mm-hmm. And that was going on at the same time.
Yes. So there's two groups.
Didn't realize that.
Yeah. And then obviously like the anti-Mormon or like ex-Mormon side of things would say, yeah, all that was going on, but what gets them is like Joseph Smith hiding the truth from his wife and from all the rest of the Latter-day Saints. It wasn't like all the Mormons were secretly in on this together. It was like just a special group, and he was lying to everyone else and hiding it from the government, hiding it from his wife. And they're like, that seems a lot like lying. And which doesn't seem that moral. And it also doesn't seem like religiously manipulating people to have sexual relationships with you is of God or is moral. So honestly, like a lot of ex-Mormons see that as, that's probably even more like perverse than people who were just sleeping around with other people, you know, like because you were using your authority in the church to do it. And obviously they don't believe that it was ordained by God. So it was like, that just seems messed up. And the fact that Joseph Smith, it's all the icky stuff. Like the fact that it's claimed that Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old. Like people use that line a lot and the church comes back with, oh, but that was not a sexual relationship. That was like an eternity only sealing, not a time in eternity, which included sexual relations. But still, it's uncomfy. Like you married a 14-year-old and then a lot of sisters were married together for one man.
That's weird.
It is weird. And things, you know, just like a lot of icky, uncomfy stuff like that. You coward.
Why don't you want me laugh?
Okay, so like, it's not really disputed that there was polygamy happening in Nauvoo by either side, but it really is like how you feel about it or like what you think is right or wrong. And even still, like, there's two groups of people, and ex-Mormons kind of see it as all being like still bad. Everyone's using sexual manipulation like through religion. That's horrible.
That's literally what cults do.
Yeah. Yes. But like the church narrative, it's like, well, it was ordained by God. And it's like those people did feel bad about it until they got the confirmation from God, which kind of begs the question, like, why would God require that?
Yeah.
But, so that we can get into all that. But what I found was interesting. So I kind of found all this out, and a lot of the things that got me was like the 14-year-olds and the sisters, and then it was like accused that Joseph Smith was like ordered a newspaper to be burned down because it was like saying they were practicing polygamy when he was trying to hide it. So all that stuff, I was just like,
you're talking about like when you were doing your own.
Yeah, when I first was kind of discovering all this, because I was dating someone who unknowingly was leaving the church. And so I was like really faithful, really in the church. And I had a really strong testimony of the Book of Mormon and everything in the church. And so I wasn't scared to look at the anti-Mormon stuff because I was like, well, I think knowledge is power. And I don't want to be blindsided by all these things I never heard before. So I'll look at it with you to try to find faith-based answers. So, but all that stuff kind of stuck with me, and it just was like hard to get over. And it was like, I don't feel morally good about that. And it doesn't seem like something I just nod along with, even after that whole relationship went away. So for a while I was like, well, maybe God allowed Joseph Smith or purposely had Joseph Smith killed because he had, like, it seems like he did a lot of good. And then once polygamy was introduced, things started to go downhill. So maybe he was like a fallen prophet or, you know, had gone astray, you know? So that's kind of what I believed for a while to help with my cognitive dissonance of everything. And it was just like emotionally draining to try to go back and forth and figure it out when it didn't seem like there was it was like the debate between like, was it good or was it not good? And I already knew I didn't feel like it was morally good. So that it was more just like, how? Like, yeah. So while still knowing there was so much good in the church and I found so much enlightenment in the church. So that's kind of what I believed for a while. But then I honestly feel like looking at it from a historical perspective sheds way more light on it than like the moral debates that go on, because so I kind of left it at that until I came across some historical documents, which we'll get into, that made me be like, what? I've never heard this before. And I think the church is going to continue to lose members who are like reasonable people and who are spiritually and emotionally intelligent until they kind of come to terms with what actually happened in history instead of holding on to the current narrative. Because what I found looking at the historical documents is it does tell a different story, and it's not that
like what the church says or
and yeah, Joseph Smith did a lot more. Like the church kind of says like, oh yeah, Joseph Smith denied polygamy, but it was more like tongue-in-cheek, like white lies. And he was like technically not lying. He was just like kind of avoiding the question or answering it in a way that could be construed as truthful. But he was still hiding it, you know? And that never felt super great. And I feel like for a lot of people, it doesn't feel super great. That whole like, oh yeah, white line, like what? But then I found these documents that was like, no, there, and we'll get into them, but it shows, a lot of it shows that Joseph Smith was not just like trying to wiggle his way around the truth, but was like actively, wholeheartedly fighting polygamy, and that he knew it was going on, and he was saying it wasn't coming from him, and that everyone who was practicing that was going to get kicked out of the church, and that him and Hiram Smith and Emma Smith and like his people were all actually trying to fight polygamy, and that it was never ordained by God. At least that's what they said. And so that was something I never heard before. Like, what? That's...
Can you imagine, like, if that if that is the case, and he's, you know, actively trying to go against it, and then all, you know, these generations later or whatever, even the church that you founded is the one that's like, no, he did. And
right.
You just kind of have that.
Yeah, like if it is true that he was fighting it all his life, and it was like the church that he helped found, and then it just totally took that and ran with it. And then to say that he was the one who started it, like that would be so infuriating. But a lot of it shows that, and I just think it's so funny that it's there in the history, but off to the sideline. Like, yeah, so I just kind of want to go into the documents because it's really interesting. You can kind of judge for yourself.
Love this.
Yeah. And honestly, with the church, to your point, it's like our concept of polygamy, of what happened, is based honestly on like a systematic rewrite of the history that happened 20, 30 years after Joseph Smith was dead. But we don't know any of that. Like, that's not part of the narrative that it changed. We think it was that way always. But there was actually some very specific things happening for key players for political and social gain that they realized they had to rewrite the history that we now all believe. So one of the biggest things was the statement of marriage. This year we're studying in church Doctrine and Covenants, and in November we're studying section 132 in Doctrine and Covenants, which
they usually like split. They usually split lessons up like by chapters or by like sections.
That's what they're doing for Doctrine and Covenants.
Okay, and
sometimes they'll include like if they're short chapters, so, or
like the whole month is gonna be a whole chapter.
I mean, it's usually not that. It's usually like no. It's usually like groups of sections, you know, because there's over 100. You know,
I've been to church. I don't remember that long.
Well, and they change things up, but they usually have like sections. You know, let's because there's like over obviously 100 sections, and there's not 100 weeks in the year, so they break it up.
Right.
Like we'll go over this and this and this, but they kind of chunk it up that way.
Gotcha.
But in November, we're studying section 132, which is claimed to be the revelation given to Joseph Smith on polygamy, like the official one, which was in July of 1843, a year before he died. So it's kind of wild because that section is still in our modern day scriptures, and we study it. And it's a freaking long chapter, but I actually want to do an episode about it because it is kind of crazy, some of the stuff in it. And I think it pertains particularly to women, about like the divine origin of polygamy, but also like the concept and definition of consent and like the value of virginity and like all these interesting things that were wrapped up in polygamy. And that's still in our scriptures, and I think have also evolved into different aspects of like purity culture and things like that. So I want to dive into that because that is like literally something we still study in Sunday school, and that is like allegedly what the church says. Like if you read the little the scripture heading, it's like, yeah, this is what the revelation about polygamy given to Joseph Smith in July 1843 when he was praying to God to ask about like why Abraham and David and Solomon all got multiple wives and what that was about. So, but the crazy thing is what they don't tell you is that that section actually replaced an original section, which was called the Statement of Marriage. It was section 102, and it existed in D&C from 1835 for Joseph Smith's entire life, and even further up until 1876 when Brigham Young took it out and only had section 132 in there.
Interesting.
No one ever says that. But when the Joseph Smith papers got released, in like a little appendix off to the side, there's the Statement of Marriage. And it was the official doctrine and the official stance on marriage for Joseph Smith's whole life.
Interesting.
And it's really...
Tell me what the Joseph Smith papers are.
Yeah, so the Joseph Smith papers were kind of a response to the internet and a lot of like anti-Mormon.
So that's what the church put out.
Yeah, but it's actual documents. So it's not just like the gospel essay topics. The gospel essay topics are like Mormon apologists and people in the church responding to the arguments made in like anti-Mormon literature. But just the Joseph Smith papers was this historical project that was done.
When was it done?
Huh?
When was it done?
I don't know the exact time, maybe like 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Pretty recent.
Because the church had all these documents from Joseph Smith's time. And so the Joseph Smith papers were this historical project that was released because the church had all these documents from Joseph Smith's lifetime that they were kind of gatekeeping. No one else had access to them. They had all this library. And so in an attempt to... The church had been accused of gatekeeping and whitewashing history and hiding things. And so in an attempt to be like more transparent and to let people know like what was really happening in Joseph Smith's life, they had this huge historical project where they released the Joseph Smith papers, which is like original documents, to the general public. And now it's a website and you can find it, and it's not like you have to be a special historian of the church to look at it. So the crazy...
How many other documents they have that we don't know about?
A ton. So a lot of people... That's the interesting thing, is the Joseph Smith papers got released, but now people are looking through them and being like, this isn't all making sense. Like, a lot of his journals are written by other people, and there's pages that were purposely left blank that were filled in later, and things that were being marked out, and things that were like written in different handwriting. And so now people are like, and there are people who are looking into it who have different theories on what is going on. A lot of it has to do with the idea of the rewriting of the history that was done by Brigham Young and people later. But now people are saying, you know whose journals we want? We want you to release William Clayton's journals.
Who's William Clayton?
William Clayton was the guy last time who was in England who was like, this lady gave me an orange.
Oh, he's the orange guy.
Yeah, he's that guy. So the reason why is because he is one of the most prominent figures for scribing for Joseph Smith, where there's a lot of discrepancies in the Joseph Smith papers. And so people are like, we want to see his journals, actually. And because also in the documents, there is a lot of people writing, like Brigham Young or William Clayton or Willard Richards, like different people writing, like, worked on revising church history today. And so people saw that, they're like, there definitely was a revision of the church history to fit a certain narrative by these people. So right now, the church is actually preparing to release William Clayton's diaries as well. It hasn't been released yet, but... I
hope he has lots of oranges.
I'm sure there's lots of...
all sorts of food.
Fun, juicy little details. So that's what the Joseph Smith papers are. And so that's where the Statement of Marriage is. It's like in a little appendix somewhere. But it's also really interesting because you have the actual sources that you can see. And then you can read the transcript, but then they also include like historical introductions to them. And it's really interesting because obviously primary sources are primary sources, but it's interesting to see the narratives that are attached to the historical introduction. So I want to read you first some things that are said in the Statement of Marriage, and then we can get into what the church says about it.
Okay.
So verse 1 says, According to the custom of all civilized nations, marriage is regulated by laws and ceremonies. Therefore, we believe that all marriages in this Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints should be solemnized in a public meeting or feast prepared for that purpose, and that the solemnization should be performed by a presiding high priest, bishop, elder, or priest, not even prohibiting those people who are desirous to get married of being married by other authority. We believe that it is not right to prohibit members of this church from marrying out of the church if it be their determination so to do, but such members will be considered weak in the faith of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I know that part's kind of funny.
Let's say it again.
Okay. It says, we believe that it is not right to prohibit members of this church from marrying outside of the church if it be their determination so to do, but such persons will be considered weak in the faith of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Faith? What does it mean to be considered weak in the faith?
Well, I mean, I feel like we can see that nowadays.
Yeah.
Like honestly,
well, they didn't get married in the temple.
yeah, like she married a non-member. You know, like that's definitely something that's still prevalent in our culture.
Yeah.
But the thing that I did think that was interesting was how it said specifically that marriages were supposed to be like public feasts and a public meeting.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, that's like way different.
Like a bishop or an elder or whatever.
Or yeah, but then it also says, but it's okay if they are married by someone who's not like authority, not in the church, like a civic person married them, which is really interesting because that's definitely not what we do nowadays. Like temple marriages are number one, and they're like sacred and private, and you need a temple recommend obviously to go, so it's not public at all. So yeah, I kind of like, I think that's so interesting. What was your experience when you were in the church about marriage? Like, what do you feel like people were telling you, like their advice in the church?
About marriage?
Yeah, about like marriage in terms of like in the church or the temple or non-members or, you know, like that whole discussion.
Oh, man. You tell me yours, and maybe I'll think of it.
Well, I mean,
I'm like, I gotta reflect.
It's just kind of that. I remember for me, like temple, from a very young age, the temple is the number one goal. And the only way to get to the temple is not only do you have to be worthy, but you have to marry someone in the church who is also worthy, so you can go together. So like the idea of marrying a non-member is kind of like you're depriving yourself of blessings, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not that like you can't have a good life if you marry a non-member or someone outside of the church, but you just don't get the blessings of the temple, which they really teach like that's the number one goal. Like you do, like the temple and eternal families and all of that is really the whole purpose of life, and that's where everything in the church leads up to. And so honestly, for me it was pretty good because there was like standards in going to the temple that I felt like kept me away from some crazy people who were trying to like go different crazy ways, you know? So for me it was helpful, but it's a lot of pressure, you know? It's kind of like temple marriage with a church member or bust. Yeah. Is that how you felt, or?
Yeah, for sure. I remember like getting my patriarchal blessing and being like, that was like my favorite part. I was like, I'm gonna find a worthy companion and go to the temple.
Yeah.
And actually my patriarchal blessing was very it's like taboo to talk about publicly, but very temple work heavy.
Really? Interesting.
It said a lot about, I'm gonna like respect it for what it is and get into details, but that was like a good portion of me.
That's so interesting. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, and I feel like nowadays it's a very important part of our religion. So I just thought that was interesting that was not like originally a part of the spiel, like Joseph Smith. That was kind of instituted later. So that's verse number 1, and then honestly that little bit talking about it being a public feast is what made me re-look into church history after I had that whole like that's what I think. He probably like was killed on purpose because he was practicing polygamy, and I kind of put it away for a while.
Yeah.
But then someone I went to high school with, he made a post on Facebook, and it was like this little article called A Public Feast. And it was about how Joseph Smith thought that marriages should be open for members and non-members to participate in.
Yeah.
And
I've always felt like that's really sad that, like, you know, when people do get married in the temple, like, people that aren't temple worthy don't get to come in and watch it.
right.
That's a little...
Especially if
I
you...
understand the whole concept of, like, the worthiness and... I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying that, like, oh, just let everyone in the temple, because I know that's really sacred to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I do think that is really hard if you do have a mixed family where some people are in the church and some people aren't. Like, if your mom isn't in the church, or, you know, like, your parents, or, you know, that is kind of a hard decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd never heard anything to the contrary of that in the church. And so when I saw him post that article, I was like, what? So that was so interesting to me that Joseph Smith said that. And then it kind of changed. Then I was, like, interested in this again. I was like, maybe there's things historically, not just the right or wrong of it, but, like, maybe there's things historically that, like, are not what we think it is. That isn't just to support one narrative or the other, but that there's more here than people are talking about. And that's what got me back into looking into everything, was that article based on this scripture.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the article about, the public feast?
It was just about this and how Joseph Smith wanted public marriages in the church and how he supported that. And in his lifetime, that's how marriages were done.
Mm-hmm.
And how, like, that's kind of a happier doctrine because it doesn't separate families.
Yeah.
So that was the article. And then kind of going into the statement of marriage, verse 2, it just kind of writes out the verbiage of the vows for the, like, about keeping your covenants and being joined together. Verse 3 says the clerks of the church should record the marriages. And then verse 4 says this: all legal contracts of marriage made before a person is baptized into this church should be held sacred and fulfilled, inasmuch as this church of Christ has been reproached with the crime of fornication and polygamy. We declare that we believe that one man should have one wife, and one woman but one husband, except in case of death, when either is at liberty to marry again. It is not right to persuade a woman to be baptized contrary to the will of her husband, neither is it lawful to influence her to leave her husband. All children are bound by law to obey their parents, and to influence them to embrace any religious faith or be baptized or leave their parents without their consent is unlawful and unjust. We believe that all persons who exercise control over their fellow beings and prevent them from embracing the truth will have to answer for that sin.
Dang.
Yeah.
Wait, so who wrote that?
So that was the statement of marriage that was put in D&C. And we don't really know who wrote it. There's no evidence that Joseph Smith wrote it, but, like, everyone voted and approved what was allowed into D&C.
Okay.
So
this was put in after or before? Sorry.
After or before what?
Because you said the one part, the Joseph Smith, the statement of marriage.
Uh-huh.
Was taken out and replaced with something else?
Oh, yes. So this was put in 1835 when Joseph Smith was alive.
Okay.
For the rest of his life, and was taken out in 1876.
Okay, so this was part of the document taken out.
This is part of the documents that was taken out, and this is the part that is not current scripture.
Gotcha.
Section 132 is about current scripture and replaced that.
Interesting. All I have to say is that doesn't sound like what homeboy missionaries were doing.
What do you mean?
Going and convincing their wives to be baptized and to leave their husbands.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
I think that's why I was, like, confused about the document, because I'm like, wait, where did this come from? Like,
right.
Talking about this, because these guys definitely were not doing this.
Yeah, you're like, this doesn't seem like it matches up. Yeah. Well, and it didn't. And so a couple things that I like about this verse is how it seems to, like, respect agency a lot. Yeah. Like, for people outside the church, like, don't ruin your relationships with, if you have people in your family, whether that's your parents or your kids or your spouses who aren't in the church, don't ruin your current relationships because of the church, you know, like, let them have their agency and don't try to persuade them to, like, break those relationships. But then also the biggest thing in that verse that really got me was how it says, we condemn fornication and polygamy. Yeah. Like, that is not like, oh, let me avoid the question. It's pretty plain.
It's straight out there.
Yeah. So, and one thing that bugs me is people who defend polygamy a lot. Um, a lot of times, like the apologists and stuff are like, oh, well, there's different terms like polygamy. Yeah, Joseph Smith was against polygamy, but he was for plural marriage and celestial marriage. And he was against spiritual wifery, but not against plural marriage. It's like, plural marriage is literally the exact same thing as polygamy, and they did not make those differences back then, so you can't make those differences like right now.
It's like they're trying to jump on the modern train of like polyamory versus like open marriages and polygamy.
Which is funny because the church is very traditional in what they view of marriage now, so it's like, why are you trying so hard to defend polygamy?
Yeah, it's very odd.
It is odd. But I actually looked up the definitions because it's specifically in that verse says fornication and polygamy. And so I looked up the definitions of the 1828 Webster Dictionary of those words, just so it's like, okay, if you're all about definitions, let's read what that meant back then. So fornication meant the incontinence or lewdness of unmarried persons, male or female, also the criminal conversation of a married man with an unmarried woman, as well as adultery and incest. So basically just like sex outside of marriage. That's what fornication meant back then.
Okay.
Or cheating or incest. And then polygamy, the definition was a plurality of wives or husbands at the same time, or the happiness of such plurality. When a man has more wives than one, or a woman has more husbands than one at the same time. So it's pretty crystal clear, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, if you have more than one, the end. And it says plurality. It's not like those were special terms used for celestial marriage and not for polygamy. You know, it's like, everyone knew what that meant, and to try to say it doesn't is a stupid argument because it's not realistic towards history. And also the interesting thing about the whole definition war that goes into this debate is how the church's definition of polygamy is only one-sided when it comes to gender. And it's still the case now. Like a man can marry multiple women. That's how it was back then. But a woman cannot marry multiple men and have multiple husbands.
Yeah.
And so you saw back then women leaving their husbands to go join polygamy. It's not like they could have multiple husbands at the same time.
Yeah.
And they were very clear, and they still are clear, like, no, women cannot have multiple husbands. The end. But a man can have multiple wives. And even now, in the afterlife, a man can be sealed to multiple women, but a woman cannot be sealed to multiple men. I think that's going to change pretty soon, actually, because I think a lot of people are pushing back against that.
What do you think is going to change?
I think they're going to allow multiple women to be sealed to multiple men in, like, for eternal marriages.
Interesting.
Yeah. But,
yeah, because that's always been one of those that's bothered me.
Yes. And every divorced person who I've talked to in the church bothers them, because that's the thing.
I mean, it bothers the women.
Yeah, it bothers the women. I've never really talked to, it doesn't really affect the men that much. And because we are taught to put so much emphasis on eternal families and heaven and the afterlife and like making these bonds for now into eternity. And so the idea that like,
it's kind of messed up.
It is. It complicates things.
It's like that's what you're working for, but because you made a choice and things don't work out with that person for whatever reason, and for some reasons are way worse than others, and you don't want to be sealed to them, but like this is what you're living your life for the afterlife in a way to get your blessings in the afterlife. That's a freaking blessing. Yeah.
100%. And there's just like no religious justification for why women can be sealed but not men. Like, I guess you could like argue the priesthood, but that still doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't.
So, yeah, I know that bothers a lot of people, and I think it will eventually change because I feel like they're not going to do the opposite and say.
I think they would change that though, like for everybody that's like died already. Like,
yeah. Wait, what you asked? You asked why?
I'm saying, like, if they were to change that, how would they explain that for, like, people that have already died and stuff? Like,
I think that's the hard thing with religion is it's like there's changes that need to be made, but if we make changes, everyone's going to question our authority and say, well, why did you do that in the first place? You know?
Mhm.
So I think religion is kind of in a hard place in that situation.
Yeah, that's where they like have to stick to their
Mm-hmm.
guns, even if it's really old and outdated, and
Yeah.
you can't admit that it's wrong. You can't.
Yeah. It's really, yeah, you are stuck in that, like, oh my gosh, people are going to question our authority if
Or
we
think we're being dishonest,
or think we're not of God.
or making things up.
That's why I think, like, I generally feel like if a church changes for the better, there's so many people that attack them and are like, see, they're not real. And I'm like, I think you should, like, let churches evolve.
What's the alternative?
Yeah, the alternative, it's like, it's kind of like a gotcha moment, you know. It's like they know the alternative, they know they don't want the alternative of the church never changing because it has bad things. Like, they don't want that. They just want to, like, have a gotcha with the church and be like, see, it's not true because they changed and they said that was true. Now they're saying this is true, you know. But I think it's okay to let churches evolve and let religion evolve, especially when it's towards more modern, positive thinking. And I think you kind of get a grain of salt that way, because I think a lot of people are like, no, this is the one and only, everything the prophet says, you know, it's just like, can do no wrong. And I think it's okay to realize that religion can do wrong. And like,
I feel like that would shake a lot of people, though.
It would.
To think that way.
Yes.
That's why I always think you're so unique, because you're still in it, but you definitely have your own opinions and your own beliefs. It's
interesting because I did used to be that type of person where that would shake my faith, and this kind of stuff did shake my faith. Not shake my faith, I'm like, oh, I don't believe anymore, but shake my faith is like, I don't even want to look at that because I love this faith so much and I can't compromise on any of these things because you have so much devotion and so much of your life riding on this. And kind of the motivation to do all the things you're supposed to do in the church, you have to have this one and only belief almost.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. That's what I thought. I don't think that way anymore. I think you can live the religion to the fullest extent you want to and still have nuanced views. And for me, it's what's allowed me to stay. Because I think everyone approaches it differently. Some people are like, I can't handle I cannot handle the idea, whether it was Joseph Smith or Brigham Young, that someone practiced polygamy in the church and leader and blah, blah, blah. And so I'm leaving. Like, and that's 100% people's prerogative. Or there's other people who are like, I don't know, but I believe in God. I believe in the Book of Mormon and I find goodness in the church. I'm going to stay. But I don't know and I don't care to know. Like, that's not really affecting me. So I'm not going to look into all this.
It's kind of like you're kind of making that choice either way.
Of what?
I don't know. I don't know exactly how to say this. It's like you either have to choose those things, like either being like, I don't know, I don't want to know, I don't care, I like the church, or being like, I don't like this at all, goodbye. I don't know. I just don't understand why more people can't like have that, like, I don't know, just make their own choices.
Yeah, just like have your nuanced views and yeah, and I think it is hard for people. There's a lot to it, you know, and I think different personalities and your different like upbringings and stuff leans you to one way or the other. But
there's just a lot in religion that's like you cannot question it.
Yeah, it's very authority based. And so I think once you start to question authority a little bit, a lot of people are like, oh, well, no, you know, like, and it feels very freeing and it feels like it's all these like kind of extreme things that you're believing. And so if you go away from the extremities, sometimes you're like, oh, well, that was all stupid. But yeah, I see both sides of it 100% because I feel like I've never fully been on the leaving church side, but I feel like I get it because I've seen you and I've seen lots of people in my life who I love dearly and who are smart, emotionally intelligent, spiritually intelligent, like who are good people leave the church. And so I feel like I get it. And I'm not like, well, I don't know, you know, like whatever people say, like, oh, I'm just worried about their salvation, or like, oh, they just want to party, or whatever it is that people say, you know, like I honestly don't think that about people who leave the church. I honestly feel like they have their reasons, but I also as staying in the church, I also see why people stay, and I do think it's beautiful. And I do think sometimes people get it wrong by being so harsh on religion. Yeah, so that was kind of a long tangent, but I do think it is important to, I think for me, the more important thing about being religion or not being religious is morality. And I think having your moral compass and not compromising on that. And I feel like a lot of people think they can't do that in religion, so they leave religion, or they have to have religion to do it, so they stay in religion. And for me, I feel like the church only has as much power as you give it. And so for me, it's like, oh, well, I just follow my moral compass, and when it's with the church, I like go along with it. And if there's things that I don't believe in, like polygamy, then I can still have my difference of opinion. And because I don't believe that this person holds their salvation, my salvation, in their hands because they're an authority, like they have no power over me.
Right.
Like I know the authority is God.
Yeah.
So yeah. But it's kind of crazy because I think people just have to justify, especially with polygamy and church history and stuff like that. Like, no, Joseph Smith had to practice it. And it's crazy because there's a lot of vocal people right now who are like, it's kind of cringy the way they justify polygamy. It's like, why are you justifying it? We don't practice it anymore. But they there's podcasts and people who are like posting online just very much like, no, everyone who says polygamy didn't happen or is wrong are missing the point. And it's like, why are you defending this? We don't practice this at all. And I feel like, especially after looking at these documents, you really do have to perform like mental gymnastics to say that Joseph Smith practiced like, it's clear, it's literally right there. But that kind of goes to your point of the Joseph Smith papers, like who wrote that statement. So the historical introduction to the Joseph Smith papers for this statement of marriage says, truthfully, like there's no proof that Joseph Smith wrote this statement, but it was put in 1835. But then it heavily leans on this story told by Brigham Young 35 years ago when he's talking to Joseph S. Smith, who was a huge polygamy advocate and a polygamist himself, along with Brigham Young. He tells the story about the statement of marriage. He's like, oh yeah, that was put into the Doctrine and Covenants because of Oliver Cowdery. I really think Brigham Young hated Oliver Cowdery, but he's like, Oliver Cowdery put it into D&C, and he tried to put it in three different times, and Joseph Smith said no every single time because he didn't like that it said you couldn't practice polygamy or that we like condemn polygamy. But then Oliver Cowdery just put it in anyway, and that's that, but it was never Joseph Smith. And so that's like
really just like spit on his name.
I know. And everything I've looked at, he's a good guy. But I think there's a lot of scapegoating, and I feel like honestly people would accuse like people who believe what I believe, like, oh, you're just scapegoating what Joseph Smith did onto Brigham Young. But it's like, okay, let's look at the evidence then.
Yeah.
Because that's their claim. And what is that claim based on? A 30-year-old story between two polygamists,
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that has no proof. And also Oliver Cowdery, like D&C is full of Joseph Smith telling people they're wrong. Like, Joseph Smith did not have a problem rebuking people who he felt were like teaching false doctrine or trying to lead the church a different way. Like, I feel like that's the narrative of D&C, is Joseph Smith doing that over and over again. And so I was like, even if that did happen, why would Joseph Smith allow that statement, especially if Oliver Cowdery went over his head to put it in there after he said no 3 times? Why would Joseph Smith allow that to stay in the scriptures for the rest of his life? That doesn't make sense in the context of how we know these people acted historically.
Yeah.
So that doesn't, the only argument I can think of that would make sense was like, oh, maybe it would seem like a smoking gun. Yeah, the only thing that I can think of is if Joseph Smith was secretly practicing polygamy and didn't want anyone to know that he was practicing polygamy. So now that it was out there, he's like, oh, it's going to look suspicious if I remove it after it's been published, That's the only like half decent argument I can think of for why Brigham Young's story may possibly be true. And Brigham Young specifies that it was the polygamy thing that Joseph Smith didn't like about that statement. So that's the only thing that I could see. And maybe that would be more believable to me if there wasn't further documents where Joseph Smith is clearly condemning polygamy in no uncertain terms. Like if this was a one-off, it's like, okay, sure, maybe Oliver Cowdery did that. It doesn't make sense in the context of how Joseph Smith acted by allowing it. It doesn't make sense in a lot of different ways, but sure, maybe that happened. Except there's other documents that definitely go into it that will go over in the next episodes that happen later in life, even later in life. And because that's also an argument that some people use, like, oh, well, Joseph Smith was opposed to polygamy during different times of his life, and then different times of his life, he was trying to come to terms with what God was telling him. But these documents that we'll get into next time are like pretty close to before he dies. So some of his most recent public like views on it before he died.
Cool.
So yeah, that's what we'll go over next time.